there's two sides to every coin. Then there's a conversation you can join. But I'm an old dog and there's new tricks. And some of my opinions you just can't fix. 'Cause I'm an old man yelling at the sky. I'ma shake my fists at the clouds and cry. Get off my lawn, you snowflake, before I have a meltdown, breakdown, shakedown. 'Cause this is my hometown, so back down, sports clown. It's all just a game, and it's the last down, let down, cowtown. I said it's all just a game. I give the touchdown, the rundown, the lowdown. 'Cause it's over the game. Gonna crack down, shut down, the sundown. I said it's all just a game.
Hi, kids. Welcome back. Hope you had a wonderful weekend, a long weekend with Good Friday. Some not working today. Can appreciate that the weather has been spectacular here in YYC, which is, nice. It's a little bit of change. Considering the last couple of months. Glad you're with us. Welcome to Just a Game. I would be me. You would be you. Appreciate you stopping by. Speaking of stopping by, a couple of guests in studio today. Colin Patterson from the 89 Stanley Cup team, Flames Alumni, will join us. As well, a little later on, the managing editor for FlamesNation, Ryan Pike, will stop by. Flames in action tonight. We will get into that. Reminder, we're broadcasting live from Treaty 7 territory. And, of course, this is an inclusive program, so everybody's welcome. Everybody's safe here. Glad you could be with us. I hope that you're finding some entertainment in the world of sport these days, because it seems like we are getting some. Certainly from a baseball standpoint, if you watch the Jays and the Angels yesterday, you have no right to complain about entertainment. You got all of it. If you were like many who were in my circle, not me, but many who were in my circle, glued to the couch for the Masters when it was on. Obviously, some weather delays and shortened days and those sort of things. You saw John Rahm pick up his second career title, his first Masters title. Lots to be excited about. Even Saturday night, the Flames knew the stakes as they were chasing the Jets. The Jets shutting out the Nashville Predators. Prior to the Flames playing the Canucks shutting out the Flames for the first 40 minutes. Thatcher Demko was spectacular. And quite honestly, in the grand scheme of things, so was Jacob Markstrom. Third period rolled around, and how many times have we said this? How many times have we uttered the phrase, "That's the season in a nutshell," folks? The Flames, who up until 9 days prior had not won a game when trailing going into the third period, but did so in their previous visit to Vancouver, rallied quickly at the beginning of the third period, found a way to get two past Demko, tied the game. Both goalies were excellent the rest of the way. Got into an overtime period, which really started off somewhat tentative. I think it was almost 90 seconds in before anybody registered a shot. But once that started, it was a breakneck back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Really the best of what 3-on-3 can bring you, except no goal. And then you go to the fortunes of the shootout, and the Flames just did not have it on that night. They lose 3-2. They get a single point, but let's lay it all on the line. I mean, the Flames accounts and their social media will tell you that, still alive and those sort of things. But boy, it's tough sledding right now. It is tough sledding right now. Hosting Nashville tonight, so another team that you're chasing, or not chasing, you're in a race with. Interesting note about the Nashville game tonight. If the National Hockey League used the same playoff formula that the NBA did, these two teams would meet later on in the week again in Calgary as part of a play-in game. As a matter of fact, the Raptors host the Bulls on Wednesday. That's the 9-10 team or 9-10 matchup. So I'm not proposing it. I'm not a proponent of it. I know that it gets thrown around every once in a while, but it is possible that this would have been a potential preview of a play-in game. Having said that, 2 games to go, as you saw on the schedule. This one tonight against Nashville, and then the San Jose Sharks on Wednesday to wrap up the season, most likely. It's not done. It's not over, but it's real close to being done and real close to being over. One other thing I wanted to highlight in the National Hockey League, and we will be talking to Billy Jaffe on Wednesday from Nesson. The Bruins win their 63rd game of the season. 63. That's a new NHL record for wins in a year. This, of course, was a team that was supposed to be, rebuilding the tail end of this was supposed to, they got a new coach and got some guys to come back, and Krejci came back, and Bergeron decided to keep playing, those sort of things. They have been absolutely nothing short of a juggernaut. Pasternak with 60 goals on the season. The Bruins look really, really good in the East. Of course, it's your, pick 'em. Do you want to be on a roll going in, or do you want to have coasted all the way in? Because Boston's not coasting right now. They're still winning games. Having all of that under their belt, it shall be interesting. And not that everything is about the local hockey heroes, but I do contend that the best game they played this year was against the Bruins, and I do contend that despite losing it in overtime, it was rather dominant against a dominant team, which further, again, talk about conundrums, further talk about things that make very, very, very little sense. That is certainly one of them. Just touching on it briefly, in baseball yesterday, I don't know if you saw this. Nobody would have blamed you had you turned away from the Blue Jays Anaheim game in the bottom of the 5th or the top of the 6th, because Toronto was trailing 6-0 to Ohtani and Mike Trout. But then and then the Jays scored 6 runs to tie it. Top of the 7th, they scored 4 more. They went up 10-6 on Anaheim. Anaheim tied it in the bottom of the 9th with 3 more runs. And then we go into the 10th, and Toronto scored 2. Anaheim scored 1. Toronto wins this crazy one, 12-10, or 12-11, I should say, in 10 innings. The stat that kind of popped for me was home runs. Anaheim had 4 in this game. Toronto just 1. So Toronto able to score 11 runs or get to 12 runs with just 1 home run. So interesting record, 6-4 for Toronto as they get to come home and get set to have their home opener. Anaheim, who I think a lot of us are kind of watching, they're 5-4 with Ohtani and Trout. By the way, Kikuchi was kind of roughed up in this game. That's part of the problem when you start talking about guy. Oh, he looks great. His first outing, he was fantastic. And yeah, he was very much roughed up against a team that can hit. There's no doubt about it. Anaheim has some offense. We are live this afternoon in the Oodle Noodle studio. Local, loved, and delicious. Since opening their first store back in 2005, Oodle Noodle has been all flavor and just the right amount of weird. 2 locations, 1244 17th Avenue Southwest, 105 Main Street North in Airdrie. Pickup and delivery. We will welcome in our first guest of the afternoon. By the way, all guests are presented by our good friends. Oh, man, these guys have been awesome to us here recently, coming aboard and helping us. I got to thank the folks at the Ski Cellar Snowboard, skicellarsnowboard.com. 45 years in Calgary, 3 locations. They're easy to find. You don't have to hunt around. They're right where you need them. But more importantly than that, right now, skiing's kind of slowing down, but there's still snow in the mountains. So you want to check them out. Take advantage of the opportunities and the great deals on right now for warm clothing, even if it's for next year. Again, Ski Cellar Snowboard, skicellarsnowboard.com. They've been around Calgary since 1946. Our next guest hasn't been around that long.
Thanks.
No, it's it's probably, but you've been around since 83, right?
Yeah.
And he's the first of the guests of the Barnburner program that we've stolen. Colin Patterson, kind enough to join us in studio. How are you?
Excellent, Rob. How are you?
I am great. This is home for you, boy. This neighborhood sure is going to be something in the summer, isn't it?
Is it ever? There's some great little places opening up. It's a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Not a lot of fun to be a Flames fan at this moment, but it was. I want to go all the way back because over last week, Daryl Sutter coached game 401, became the all-time leader in games coached by a Flame coach, although he did it in 2 stints. Badger Bob was the leader at 400. We had Peter Marr on, we had Eric DeHachuk on, both covered Badger. You played for Badger. 2 more different coaches you will not get in Daryl Sutter and Badger Bob Johnson, right?
Absolutely. I never played for Daryl, obviously, but probably would have done well under him. But did play for Badger. Badger was all hockey, like everything related to hockey. He had the greatest attitude about the game and about life. And just, he was a real interesting guy. He was all about developing players and developing the game.
He came from the college game, which you did too.
Yes.
Did it make it an easier transition for you?
It did, because I think when Badger came in, there was a lot of older players the year before, and they moved a lot of those guys out, and we're looking for, new players to bring in. And I was fortunate enough as a college free agent to come in in 83, and Badger, wanted to make me a player. And he did. I mean, he worked hard with me, and, people might have looked at it and gone, boy, I don't know what you're doing walking like a duck around center ice, but it did help my skating.
I'm sorry, what?
So he would get me you'd squat down, you walk like a duck, or you would call it the duck walk. And so you'd go around the center ice, around the circle, face-off circle. And I would do that for, probably 5 or 10 minutes. And he'd be sort of wandering off, thinking of something else, and forget you're doing it. And I mean, it's hard work if anybody gets down and does that. And it's no wonder I've got bad knees now.
This was like practice, or was this in training camp?
This was practice. This was after practice. Badger, one thing about him was, in the early days, we'd practice all the time.
Yeah.
Like he'd practice on a game day. You'd be practicing an hour and a half.
Right.
And finally, Lanny went in, and some of the older guys said, hey, Badger, on a game day, because you're playing, 80 games or 78 games, whatever it was back in the day, we don't need to practice a full practice in the morning of a game. And so, he sort of let his foot off the pedal a bit for that.
Okay.
But, in those days too, the away team would come on after you, and, they'd have the ice at 11, and you wouldn't want to give it up at 10:30 or 10:45, and you'd wait till the bitter end till it was 11, and then you go off the ice, even if you just had one guy on the ice. And sometimes that one guy would be me walking around the circle
as a duck.
And I remember Dave Taylor, who, obviously the greatest player ever to play at Clarkson University. And
of course.
And so he came up after, and he said, what were you doing out there? I was walking like a duck to improve my skating. And he goes, oh, okay.
Yeah. Did it work?
Yeah, it worked.
It worked.
It worked, yeah.
So here's again, every time we have a conversation about Badger Bob, there's always 2 things that come up in a story. So the first one for me is the hour and a half practice. You guys practiced an hour and a half on game days.
Yeah. And what I mean, it was, after a while it got grueling, and especially, for a college player, because you only played, 34, 40 games.
Right.
The extra games alone was a lot, let alone practicing. And he was a teacher.
Yep.
He X's and O's. He loved the game. He was always studying the game. He'd always be interested in how other teams played and what they did on their power play, penalty killing. Badger was way ahead of the curve on that, on practicing power play and penalty killing. And his belief was, if we had a good power play and good penalty killing, we'd be up at the top of the league, and we were.
Right.
Regardless of your 5-on-5 play, which we were pretty good. But, those 2 things. And he had this drill. It was called Joker's Wild. It was my favorite drill. It was, you had 4 guys in, red, 4 guys in white. And then you had the guy who was a Joker, which typically was Al McInnes, to be, whether he had a black jersey on or an orange one, he would be on the power play the whole time. So you go basically a minute on power play penalty killing, and then it would reverse. So the guys in the penalty kill would go on the power play, and you go back and forth. And it was, it was a hard paced drill, and it was really good drill. And always thought that was, one of his gifts to the game was the power play penalty killing and in that aspect. But he was also huge in nutrition.
Yeah.
He
was.
Physical conditioning. We used to ride the bike after the game. I used to say, not that you can use his name anymore, but I rode more miles than Lance Armstrong after a game. And then, nutrition. We had people come in to talk about nutrition to us. We had a yoga instructor come in, and all those things. It was great. He was way out in front of that, although we probably weren't as accepting of that at the time. And even the sports psychologist, that type of stuff was big for Badger.
Tell me about the yoga, because I think you just kind of alluded to it. In hindsight now, it was a great innovation. At the time, not so much. Right?
Yeah, not so much of the time. And, you can imagine going back in the day for the guys, hurry up, we got to get out for lunch and have a burger and a beer. But this lady, Shirley Johansson, would come in and, she would get us all, we'd be in the workout room, and we all be out, and she'd be stretching us. And she had this real calming voice, like any yoga instructor. She, relax your quads, relax your shoulders, let your, neck sink in deep into the carpet, and then, relax your buttocks and, and all this stuff. Right. So she doesn't show up one day. And so Bearcat, of course, he's been reading the yoga books, and so he takes over, and he's like, okay, relax your legs, relax your arse, guys. And that was it. Bearcat's time as a yoga instructor ended then. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Just one more on Badger, and that has to do with his, goal was, and Pete talked about it, was always about Edmonton, right? Like, got to get the Oilers, got to knock them off the top of the mountain, right? Yeah,
knock them off the top of the mountain. And, Badger was great because he designed, game plans to play against the Oilers. You'd have your own system and style, but against the Oilers, you had to play them. Our system and style probably wasn't good head to head. They had so many great players.
Yeah.
So it was like, okay, how are we going to beat them? Here's how we need to do it. And over the years, we had very competitive games against them, competitive series. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, but I go, we did fairly well against them. Obviously the playoff time, a little bit different, but Edmonton had an unbelievable team. I mean, they won 5 Stanley Cups. They had probably 5 of the 7 greatest players, in the world at that time. And I think that probably they had the most underrated player too in Grant Fuhr.
Yeah.
I thought he was a difference in a lot of games. Even if the game was 7-6, he'd make that 7th save, or that 8th save, whatever it is, to stop that 7th or 8th goal. Not the 7th or 8th save, but we'd have like 50 shots and he'd make that one big save.
Right. As someone who was tasked at times with trying to shut down that offense and try to shut down Gretzky, can you equate what Connor McDavid's done this year to what Gretzky was able to do in those years?
Yeah. When you look at them, they're both great players. Yeah. The game was different back in the day than it is now. There's a lot of hooking and holding back in the day, a lot of, you still had the 2-line offside, so those things made a difference. You still had the automatic offside too, going over the blue line. So those things, probably impeded Gretzky to get more points, because if you think of him now, being able to be in his own end, get the puck and fire it up to a flying Yari Curry, who's right by the blue line, or Glenn Anderson, or whoever it was, the far blue line, boy.
That's a really good point. I don't know if we take, because there's been a lot of conversation about McDavid's, season versus Gretzky's best season. And that is a rather significant ability, right?
Yeah. And then you look at overtime. We didn't get overtime until, I don't know what year it was. And it was 5-on-5.
It was 5-on-5.
Yeah. It wasn't 3-on-3. So I can only imagine Gretzky, 3-on-3. I remember when he retired, obviously a huge time in sporting, and my buddies, my phone was lighting up. Like I got probably 5 or 6 calls from my buddies. So finally I answer one. My one buddy goes, "Hey, you're all over the news." I go, well, finally, what's going on? They go, "They're showing Gretzky's highlight goals."
Oh no.
Yeah, so there I am reaching
Oh,
in.
no.
I'm like, oh man. But we played against him so much,
Yeah.
and he was a fantastic player. Just his hockey IQ
Mhm.
was beyond anybody in my mind that has played the game. Was he the fastest skater? No. Do you have the fastest or hardest shot? No. But he was accurate. He was the best passer. And he knew the game. People always said, why don't you hit him in open ice? Well, it's tough to hit a guy in open ice. He was probably the best lateral mover in the game at that time too. And people go, we'll run him in the corner. Well, he's not in the corners.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
isn't his game.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And if he's behind the net, well, you can chase him behind the net and, you'll look like an idiot again. You'll end up on a highlight reel, which, a few of those, and then you learn, you got to sort of contain him and contain the guys that he's passing to.
Right. Because we always do the, bring it forward. If we brought Gretzky into today's game, what would happen? If we moved McDavid back, is he more like Gretzky or is he more like Messier in the sense of, because he's a bigger guy who can skate, right?
Yeah, I think he's probably, in between the two if you moved him back in that era. But I mean, his speed is tremendous now.
Right.
If you had that same speed then, well, but I think that if you look
he was more like Coffey that way. Right?
Yeah. Oh, just such a smooth skater. And you look at, Paul Coffey, one of the greatest defensemen ever to play the game. I mean, they had, Messier, Gretzky, Curry, Coffey, Anderson, and then add in Grant Fuhr. And then add in the host of other players that they had that they were really good. They had such a good core group of players, probably about 12 or 13 of them. And then they do a fantastic job of augmenting those players too.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's just been a lot of conversation this year, not to take anything away from McDavid, because he does look like he's on a mission, but there were a couple of those Gretzky seasons where, you just shake your head, right?
Yeah. Well, and you look at McDavid now and you go, when you look at Gretzky, Gretzky had as we talked about, those 4 other players that were all-star players. I mean, he's got Draisaitl, who is world-class.
Absolutely.
Beyond that, they've got some good players, but not, that you don't have 2 Draisaitl's or 3 Draisaitl's.
But I don't think you could have that anymore.
No, I mean, it's tough to do that.
Right.
But I look at, you look at Colorado and they've got 3 or 4 really, standout players too.
But I believe McKinnon's going to do a new contract at some point.
Yeah.
Right?
And that will all change, I'm sure.
Yeah. That's, everybody talks about the goaltending or the equipment and stuff. It's the salary cap, really, right? What would that have done?
Yeah. And it's interesting, if you could have kept, a bunch of teams together over that time. Right. And, when you think of now and you think of guys leaving because they're getting more money, which that's all great. And that's what they've worked towards. But as a team, you have to plan, hey, we got to win it in this time frame or we're losing guys.
Am I wrong? But weren't your Stanley Cup version of your team, wasn't it one of the highest paid teams at the time?
I don't know if it was the highest paid. It certainly wasn't to me. No, I think, I know that people talk about the salaries and, ours was, I think our whole team was, 4.5 million, 5 million. It was in around there.
It's kind of mind numbing to think about it now.
My 130 Canadian hit home on that pretty good. But I think that was probably actually Canadian dollars too, because we used to get paid. If you signed a contract in Canadian dollars, that's what it was in.
Right.
Now everybody's signing in US dollars. But, if you got traded from the US to Canada, it would just, you'd add the factor and go that way. But if you got traded from the US to Canada or Canada to the US, you would get your face value in US dollars. So if you were making 150 Canadian, you get traded US, you're making 150 US.
Holy cow.
So it was quite a thing when you got
bonus.
Traded. Yeah, it was a huge bonus.
Absolutely. The current version of your former club remains somewhat of an enigma wrapped in a riddle. Do you have any insight to what we have seen here this year, or what we saw on Saturday, or game to game? It's almost incredible. It's almost funny if it wasn't tragic. Yeah,
I think I look at it and I go, you can't put your finger on any one thing. I think there's a lot of multiple things that have happened to the team, and they haven't found the chemistry that they had the last couple of years. And I think last year was a career year for everybody. And then there's the changes that happen over the summer. But on paper, what they brought in, I thought they were going to be a better team.
Yep, I did
truly
too.
thought they were going to be a better team. I think everybody did, but it's an adjustment period, no question. Adjustment for coming in a new city, new weather for the guys in Florida, the pressure of the Canadian press, which is huge. The factor of going out and being noticed, the thing of opening the newspaper or going online and you're watching TV and hockey's a big thing. It's not football, it's not basketball, it's not baseball, it's not college sports. It's Calgary Flames, and then you add in the coaching and new style and the way the team plays, and so there is a bunch of adjustment. And if you don't get that chemistry right sort of at the start, I shouldn't say just at the start, but tinkering with it to get it so that it's at the right point. And and it's tough because I look at probably the last 5 or 7 games, their fourth line's been their best line. And I go, well, your fourth line can't be your best line unless you move it up to the third line, the second line, and the first line. And a lot of times when you get, the fourth line is your best line and you're playing them like your first line, well, those guys aren't used to playing the minutes that you take to be on a first line. So, it's quite interesting. It's, disappointing in a way, but they're still not out of it. That's the amazing part, is that even after the Vancouver game, which is so, disappointing, the Chicago game was more disappointing, but they've got to, in their mind, they got to go, we got to come out and just hammer the team. I mean, they did it to the Ducks in Anaheim, where they came out, they came out and blitzed them, right? And that's what they have to do against these lower teams, and just say, hey, you don't have a chance. But the longer a team stays in it, the more chance they have of actually winning and, getting a lucky bounce or a lucky goal. And, all of a sudden they're up. And watching that Vancouver game, the first period they just didn't come out like they should. And unfortunately, Jacob Markstrom's had, a couple of games where that first or second shot goes in, which is tough on a team. But on the other side, I mean, the best defense is always offensive forecheck, and you got to get the puck in. You got to have guys who, are starting the game and know what they're doing. And, they want to create and set a tone to it. Yeah. And we, watching a few games, you just haven't felt that. And it's disappointing, but I also go, don't count Winnipeg out of losing 3 games here. They haven't been the best team ever. No, they could easily lose. They've got 2 tough games coming up. They got probably an easier one tonight against San Jose. But, once again, if you think it's going to be easy.
They got shut out by San Jose a week ago, right? Yeah. So it can happen. A couple of theories that I want to run by you, because you would have more insight than I. The Chicago game last week, in which they just didn't have it. Would you get exhausted as a player if you were it's every game's a game 7, every game you got to win. I just wonder about the mental fatigue, and they just look like it. I don't think it wasn't that they didn't care, and Nazem Kadri didn't care, but Nazem Kadri coughed up the puck a lot. Do you get tired when you're chasing like this?
I think there's 2 things. One is, you shouldn't be tired. But I think you get caught up in, and we got caught up in the same thing in the day. Was Edmonton, and they were getting caught up in Winnipeg. And sometimes you lose sight of what's truly in front of you is to get to that game against, back in the day, Edmonton, but to get to that game against Winnipeg. And I don't think the team, really focused enough on beating Chicago. Let's just, at this point, you take it one game at a time, one shift at a time. I mean, it's cliche-ish, but it's true. One shift, one period, one game, then you worry about the next one.
Right.
But there was so much, hype about, the biggest game of the season is going to be the game against Winnipeg. That's going to decide it. And you know what? It isn't. The biggest game of the season at that time was against Chicago. And then, then the next night against Winnipeg. So, you end up losing to Chicago, but you beat Winnipeg. And you're still, outside looking in,
right?
Because you don't beat Vancouver, and there's a lot of things that go into the mental preparation of it. But they need to be focused every game.
Yeah,
and it can happen. Believe me, it can happen. You can have bad games, but it's up to the coach too to say, hey, this guy might not be having his best game tonight, but Walker Dewar and Lucic and Lewis are, so I'm going to play them a little more than I'm going to play the guys who are, the first, second, or third line. And I think that's probably, sometimes what, happens is, you go back to the guys who you think have brought you to the well, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But I think, for me as a, sort of marginal player in the game, I had great nights. And if the coach couldn't recognize my great nights, then they were sort of wasted, right?
Yeah.
Because at any night you could be the best player on the ice.
Sure.
And if you get played like that, then you know what? Well, that, the team's going to benefit from that.
Are you surprised at all about that he has stayed so consistent the last couple of weeks in his lineup?
No, I think once they were on a bit of a winning streak, and then he did change it. And so I think it's tough to say, well, let's throw in a, Coronado or,
or
Pelche. And, because one thing is, it sounds great. Well, they should throw him in. But if you lose, then, it's their fault.
Yeah.
Right. And you don't want that especially for young players.
Yeah. Are you confident in Markstrom coming back next year?
You know what? I think it's a different year. Last year he was fantastic. This year, probably average year. So yeah, you hope next year he's coming back and he's going to be great, but this year's not over yet. Right. So
no, it's not. And I don't, there's still 2 games to be played. And the reason I asked that question is you would have seen that too. I mean, the guy you mentioned, Grant Fuhrer, at parts of his career was outplayed by Andy Moog. Yeah. Vern was really good in 86 and excellent in 89. There's ups and downs with goalies. I just don't know when that tipping point comes, right?
Yeah. And I don't know when the tipping point comes either, but once again, Lodor was playing really well.
Yeah.
So my thing is, don't look at what you're paying guys, because you're paying the whole team, right? It's like, we got to win, and here's here's what we're paying guys. So don't play guys by how you pay them, right? That's a good lesson for any coach in the league. You play who's playing well. And if you can play who's playing well, and if you've got 2 goalies that are, one guy might not be playing great, the other guy is, you go with the guy who is. And I don't care if that's a 5-game run or a 10-game run, whatever it is, you're going with them. And then you put the other guy in, because it's tough as a player when you go, hey, I'm playing great, but they're going to let the other guy play because he's, he's a 1st-round draft choice, or he's, the highest paid guy, or he's a number 1 goalie.
Right.
So I truly believe, you got to go with the guy who's on a roll, especially in net.
The other one that I want to pick your brain on is not having a captain. I think it's insane.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Okay.
I think you need a leader. You need a leader for a lot of different reasons. And, we had tons of leaders on those teams that I played on in the 80s.
You had 3 captains.
We had 3 captains, and then we had, obviously Lanny and Pep, 2 great captains. And you go, we had guys that would go talk to the coach, that represent the team, and the coach, dealt with them on whatever was going on. And, for the media, for, the luncheons we used to have, all those things. I mean, it sounds really small, but but it's big in the grand scheme of things. And when you have just assistant captains, and every other team in the league, in almost every other sport too now, has a captain. And we're the only team that doesn't. We haven't had one for 2 years. So, are you telling me that maybe there isn't that leadership in the room? Well, I think there is. I think that there's probably about 3 or 4 guys you could say, hey, you're putting the C on, and let's go, and you're in charge. And, that I believe that there should be a captain.
Yeah. And to his credit, Darryl talks a lot about the leadership group. And I think we know who's in that. We know Tanev and Coleman and Lindholm and Anderson and Backlund. But I do know, again, not the coach, so I don't get to make the decision. I don't know why Michael Backlund hasn't worn the C for the last couple of years.
Yeah. And I go, so you say, well, that leadership group, are you calling that leadership group in? Does the leadership group get together and everybody comes in to talk to the coach, or is the coach just taking one player and talking to him? I don't know. Right. And that's why, I'm not on that inside of the game. So I don't know, but I know traditionally that's what your captain has done. Your captain's a guy, he's a leader, he's compassionate. He works with, guys who are feeling down, who, to the guys who are playing great, to, helping whatever the team needs from the coaches or from the organization.
Yeah. I don't think it's the be all end all. It's just,
No, it's just,
I think at the end of this year, and you've been here for a lot of them. I've been here for, 20 of them now. It feels like there's going to be a whole bunch of questions this year, not necessarily in the way of, why didn't you do this? More of, well, why, what happened here?
Yeah.
Right.
And as you said, because we all looked at it and said, they're a better team on
Mm-hmm.
paper.
Mm-hmm. I mean, is it out of the realm of possibility that this team would come back next year and perform to the level that it should?
Well, I mean, it very well could, but I'm sure there's going to be some
There's
changes.
always change. Yeah.
And there always will be changes,
Yeah.
right? So, you just hope that the changes aren't massive like they were last year. Like, and nobody was counting on, 2 giant changes last year. I think,
No, that's true.
One
triggered the other.
One triggered the other, and
Yeah.
and I mean, it happened, and so that changes your whole outlook of your team and your organization. But we brought in, 3 quality players for those 2 guys.
Mhm.
I mean, if you would have done individual trades, you said 3 for 2, you probably would have done that, or been very close to it. I know there was some draft choices included, but so I personally thought they were way better, and that's what's going to be discussed after, why this, why that, why that.
What completely unrelated, but when you look at an offseason of change, what was the story, or what was the transition like between Bob and Terry when you went from a coaching legend to another guy who came in and, ends up getting the cup, right?
Yeah. I mean, it takes time because, no matter who you're coaching or what you're coaching, you have some favorites that you like and kids that, I can put them on here, and, players you put on here. So there's that adjustment period. There's adjustment period for the style of game we were playing, for the way that, Badger coach versus Crispy, from, you went from an X's and O guy, to high energy guy. So that was, it was a big change, and you adjust to it. Either you adjust or you phase out, you're gone.
Yeah.
And, back in the day, the coach probably had, I don't know, they would change players out before they change the coach.
Yeah.
You look at the longevity of the coaches over that time, probably 5 years was an average, 3 to 5 years. Now you look at it, it's probably 2 to 3 years.
Well, around here it is.
Yeah.
I mean, because 401 games is not a lot of games.
Yeah.
When you think about it. John Cooper's been in Tampa Bay for 10 years.
Yeah. Well, I'd be interested, and I don't know this stat, how many, coaches Michael Bachman's had as a Flame. He's played 900 and some games.
Well, he would have had Brent, and then he would have had Bob, and then he would have had Glenn, and then he would have had Bill, and then he would have had Jeff, and now he's had Daryl.
Yeah.
And Daryl drafted him too. Let's throw that one in there. I feel like I'm missing one in that group.
It feels like, but I go, that's 8 or 9 guys, right? Or 7 or 8,
yeah,
whatever it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a lot of different coaches to adjust your style, which speaks to the longevity and what a great player Michael Bachman is and how coachable he is.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. But I also wonder a little bit about the John Cooper part.
Yeah.
Because I've opined on this, and I'd love to run it off you. I look at John Cooper and I go, I wonder how much that is the leadership core of that team, that he doesn't have to be the bad guy. The captains take care of the bad stuff.
Yeah. And I think, when you have longevity, what the coach wants.
Yeah.
What the organization wants.
But then the leaders know that.
The leaders know that. So when you go, hey, you know what? Don't do this because the coach is not going to like this.
Yeah.
Whether you think it's a great idea or not, the coach is not going to like this. So I wouldn't do that. And if the player does that, then, typically guys are talking to him again. And then once the coach talks to him, it's typically, my way or the highway. But when you've got coaches changing every year, it's tough to play for that.
Sure it is.
And if you're looking at grabbing free agents, you're a free agent. You like the coach they have now, and then in a year and a half, the guy's gone, and all of a sudden the new coach comes in, and you're going, boy, I might not fit his style, or he might not like me, or, there's all those things where you go, if you're a team that has, a John Cooper, for example, you go, I like him. I know he's going to be around.
Yeah.
I'll go there.
Well, you also know what the expectation
is too. Yeah.
Right. 100%. Let's transition a little bit, because you are wearing the black hat of the Calgary Flames alumni, which is not appropriate at all. right?
No, but it's a
But
hat.
it's a hat. Let's talk a little bit about the work of the alumni, which continues to be very, very busy. I believe we are really close to handing out adapted bikes, are we not?
We are. That's next weekend. That's next
Okay.
Saturday, or this Saturday coming up.
Right. Tell us a little bit about
So
that.
it's the CP Kids and Family Adaptive Bike Program, and what we do is kids with cerebral palsy. We help raise money so that they can get bikes that they can adapt to each child's particular situation.
Yeah.
Whatever their need is, the bikes are adapted to that. And over the years, I think we've probably supported about 1,000 bikes. So that's 1,000 kids that get to ride a bike, for whether it's the first time or they get to continue riding a bike, continue to be able to be part of a family, of their family, and do stuff with their family or do stuff with their friends. And that's so important.
It is, absolutely.
And it's one of our best days. When you raise money for stuff, it's great. It's really good. But when you can see your money going in action and helping people and seeing their results and the response from it, it's pretty amazing. From the kids are so excited, but the parents are so excited too.
Yeah.
And the bikes are, as I said, they're adapted for every particular need for the child. So not one fits all.
No.
And there's I don't know all the terminology, but when you sit back and you go to these fittings and they go, well, we need to adjust the bike for this particular child, and then they can reuse another bike. But these bikes are, I think they're $1,500
easily
each.
Yeah.
$1,500 to $2,000 each to retrofit and adapt these bikes. But it's a great program. We raise money for them through our golf tournament, which we call the Masters. Different than the one that was just on.
I don't think that different.
But yeah, so we raise great money for them, and our guys are committed to the program.
Yeah.
So we're doing a bike fitting on Saturday, this coming Saturday.
What I like the most about it is now they're very common around town, right? That it's not, you can drive or be down in Fish Creek or wherever, and you're going to see a child on a bike that is part of that program, That's the best part right now, because you've been doing it. There's some longevity, there's some turnover, there's, it's part of just being in Calgary on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon. You're going to run into one.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. And on that too is, the Special Olympics, that we support. You see the Special Olympians around town with some Flames alumni jackets on.
That's
you,
right.
And you go, you're having an impact.
Absolutely. And with the 2024 Canada Winter Games here next year, I imagine going to be really busy too.
I think it will.
Yeah. Another program that I'm really excited. Well, I get the puck, right?
Oh, yeah,
It's second year in a row that you'll be teaming with Hockey Calgary for I like it because it's a pathway to participation. A bunch of kids that got an opportunity to get equipment and try hockey. Now you're going to get them on the ice. And what's the best part about this, Patter, is that it's right before a hockey registration. So it really gives the families a good opportunity to see what it's all about.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of it is before that. And it does give, a lot of different kids the opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. And the guys get back out and get to coach a little bit.
Yeah. And that's, whether that's good or bad.
that remains to be seen. And then reverse, I'll just give you a quick update. I was at the Dungeon Wrestling event on Friday with the Kelms. So Noah, the goalie, and Ty were there. I do have to let you know that Noah went after a manager in a wheelchair who was part of the one of the events. He started, and Noah, who, as we know, at times won't say a whole lot, really started beaking off this manager. And then Ty, who I believe you and I have maybe heard a combined 20 words from, got very upset when one of the villains was using a foreign object and was screaming at the referee to open his eyes. So I thought that I knew you were coming in. I wanted to share that. That's a little off-season superheroes update for you.
Those two brothers, they stick together.
Yes, they were raising hell at wrestling on Friday, so it was a whole lot of fun. But we should point out that and congratulate the alumni further supporting superheroes with a significant donation this past week.
Yeah, we donated $15,000 to the superheroes program, and Rob, we can talk about it, superheroes all day long. I mean, it's such a great program. Helps kids that have between autism and Down syndrome and everything in between play hockey, and it's been going on for 8 years, and it's every Sunday. There's 3 ice times at Max Bell. there was 23 sessions this year, 23 days
On ice, yeah.
Yeah, and we had 20 different alumni
Yep.
participate. Some guys obviously more than once, but
Well,
it's pretty
yeah,
special.
that would be you.
Well, there's a couple of us.
And Zach Smith really,
yeah,
he threw his
stepped
name
up.
in there.
Yeah, and I mean, so it's really neat to see that program, because all the kids want to do is, learn how to play hockey. They want to be part of a team,
Mhm.
and the parents want to be part of a team. And, when I look at, the teams that we have 3 different ice times, and each one of them has a makeup of any team I've ever played on. You got a guy who's funny, you got a real good player, you got somebody with great hands, you've got the one who, doesn't talk much. And, so it's really neat to see the makeup of the team, and the kids just love it. They come out and they have such amazing time. But we wrapped it up this year with the game against the Alumni, and we had, the Alumni, and then we had 3 girls from the Mount Royal team
who just
won the Canadian championship. And it was really neat. The kids, they played. That was the most energy I've seen, and the best they've skated, every one of them. It wasn't just one kid. It was every kid. They were so excited.
I'd be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity. And had I known I was going to do this, I probably would have grabbed a photo for Gav to put up. But I just want to talk about the relationship that you've created with one of our young players, Grayson, who has gotten over the last 3 years or 4 years, I guess. You and Grayson have created this connection. And to me, I say this all the time, and I hope you appreciate it as a former NHLer. Hockey is not a static thing. Hockey is whatever the person needs it to be. And you've created this environment for Grayson where we never thought he would. His dad was the only dad that was allowed to be on the ice in the program, just because that was and now his dad is a hockey parent in the stands. That's got to be a unique experience for you.
It was, and it was a great experience. It was tough, let me tell you. I thought, it would take a couple of weeks, and it ended up taking about 2 years of, constantly being with him out in the ice. And then, and for me, I had a, knee surgery in January, so I couldn't be on the ice, as we all know. And so when I got back out for that Alumni game, I think he was mad at me. He was like, "Where you been? Don't use the knee as an excuse."
Well, we should put we should put out just put it out there too, that unbeknownst to us, you and Grayson were skating on your own too.
Yes, yeah. So it's been great. He's a great little guy, and you know what? I hope he continues playing. And that's the whole thing.
Well, that's the whole thing, right?
Like any child that you coach, throughout the years, you just hope they keep playing.
Yeah.
It's funny. I ran into a young guy that, he's now 30, which still is very young to me. He played with my son, and I coached him.
Yeah.
And I said, "Are you still playing?" He goes, "No, I'm not." I said, "Well, you got to get back into it." Because that's why we coach. You coach people. It's not to play in the NHL. It's not to play junior hockey.
Nope.
We all end up in the same league.
Yep.
It's, whether you want to call it old timer hockey or the beer league, that's where we end up. And I always felt that as a coach, I wanted to make the game and teach kids so that they could play, forever.
Sport for life.
Yeah.
Right.
And if you understand, how to skate, maybe a little bit of stick handling, how to shoot, and where to go on the ice, you can play a long time.
Yeah. And I think if anything, it's also about that camaraderie, right?
Yeah.
It's about being part of something. And we see that every Sunday. The power of that, right?
Absolutely. I mean, and as such as the superheroes program, just heartwarming, but it's just a fabulous program.
Yeah.
Really
yeah.
fabulous.
Well, we're lucky to have you.
Oh,
Okay. To wind down here, this is a week in which the NHL season is winding down. And part of that is bonuses. There might be some players trying to get bonuses. Can you share with me your story? Because you had, you played on a really effective line, at the height of the best Flames era. And you also were eligible for bonuses. Can you tell us the story about your plus minus bonus?
Yeah. So I'll take it back to my first contract where I had a bonus if I scored 50 goals. I'd get 50,000. Nobody told me it had to be in the same year. So, once I came up for my next contract, and after that, I did my own contract. And, looking at individual bonuses, you just went, well, what really applies to me? And one that did was plus minus. So I worked with Cliff Fletcher over the years, plus minus. And, it started, top in the league, the team, and then, worked its way down to, probably the top 5.
Right.
And so this particular year you're talking about in 1989, I was playing on a line with Doug Gilmore and Joe Mullen, and
Not
we
bad.
had a pretty good line.
Yeah.
Yeah. And going into the final game, I was plus 46. Joe was plus 48, and Doug Gilmore was, I think, plus 46 as well. And I had a bonus for top in the league, second in the league, and third in the league. So I was 10,000 if I got first, 7,500 if I was second,
Okay.
5,000 if I'm third.
Okay.
On the team, I had the same amounts.
Okay.
So I'm going, man, I'm too behind Joe Mullen. I said, if I can somehow work my changes and, jump out if we score and try and get my number in there, which, worked previously. I'm going, I might be able to at least tie him. And if I'm tied, I'm getting that. And then, if I come second, I mean, that's, so if I come first, it's 20,000. Come second, it's 15. Third, because there was nobody else in the league that was close to us, and nobody else in the team.
Right.
So comes down, we're playing the Oilers. I take a penalty, and I'm sitting in the penalty box, and they put Joe Mullen and Doug Gilmore out to kill the penalty. I go, they really never kill penalties a whole lot. Well, don't they go down and score? And they get a plus.
Yeah.
So now I go, okay, he's 46, now Doug's 47 47, Molly's 49 now, and I'm still at 46. My penalty ends, and I swear to God, the door opens, I put my foot on the ice. Edmonton scores, which is a minus for me. I pick my foot up. I try and get back in the penalty box, but remember old Bert in the penalty box? He's shutting the door. You gotta get out there. I can't get out there. So now I gotta the skate of shame over to the bench. So now I'm plus 45, and then those guys. And so then we get a we're playing and our line's up. Well, Gary Roberts and I are changing for each other. Well, he doesn't come off, but Hokenlube and Doug Gilmore or Hokenlube and Newey come off, and so Mullen and Doug Gilmore, sure enough, they score. I'm like, Gary Roberts comes off and go, what the frick you know? And he's like, well, what do you mean? I was out there, And so, needless to say, I end up third, and I always say I cost, it was the $10,000 penalty it cost me, because instead of getting that 10 grand, or I ended up with 5 and 5 in each. So when I look at it, it was 5, and I missed out on the other 5. So, it was a $10,000 penalty. Just killed me. And so afterwards I told Molly the story. He goes, oh, why didn't you tell me,
Oh yeah. They would have helped for sure. Right?
Yeah.
One last one for you. It was last week. Peter Marr was mentioning it that Hokenlube scored 50. It was the anniversary of that. Only Swedish player ever to score 50, which
it's crazy.
Peter Forsberg hasn't done it. Like, it's amazing.
Yeah.
You played with him. I always found him to be just a really neat guy. Like, the Magic Man, Kent Nielsen, was aloof, and, some of the Europeans were, it's different for them. What was Lube like?
Luber was just a great guy. He was a real competitor too.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a hard worker. He was, the Swedes at the time would always get, they're soft.
Yeah.
He was a tough little guy. And he was a team player. He wasn't worried about his stats. He was more about the team. And he was a great team player and a great guy. He embraced being over here.
Mm-hmm.
Where some players back in the day were like, well, I don't really want to know if I want to be in North America.
Yeah.
But, he embraced it and did it. And just a fabulous person. Like, just, beyond the hockey, just a fabulous guy. And, so many, great memories of him. But I remember we were playing Philadelphia, and they had Glenn Cochran.
Sure.
He was a big guy, like a huge guy, and he had this big beard, and he must have done something to Luber. Luber got on the bench and was like, something caveman, and he just looked over, and I was like, I was right beside Luber, and I'm going, I didn't want to say, hey, it was him who said it wasn't me. Like, oh my goodness. And then, do you remember the Larmers? They had Jeff and Steve Larmer.
Yeah.
And so he goes, we were sitting in the dressing room. He goes, I don't like that Slarmer. And we're like, Slarmer? Who's that? That guy in their team, Slarmer. And we go, Steve Larmer. Because that's Slarmer.
Yeah.
But Luber was a great guy and a fabulous player. And, you know, and his skating style was, you know, I mean, it's just so smooth and, you know, pushing outside the side. Really learned a lot from just watching him skate. But he was a great guy. And, you know, when we look at the team that we had in '89 and you talk about changes, you know, you lose Lanny, you lose Luber, you know, those things really hurt you because, you know, although you replace them with guys, it's not the same.
Yeah. And then the next year you go to Russia and the Czech Republic. That didn't help.
No, it didn't help. And I mean, I think we were sold a bit of a bill of goods too, that we wouldn't, you know, practice or we wouldn't play, you know, until a week after we got home because it was exhibition. And sure enough, you know, you get home and then, you know, oh, we need these guys to play. You got to play. And it was, you know, it wasn't as it was organized. Don't get me wrong, but it wasn't as efficient as they have the system now for going over and playing in Europe.
You probably both teams weren't on the same charter plane. With lay down. Pods or whatever.
Nothing. No, there wasn't any of that.
The only, if I remember correctly, the only thing that was really redeeming about that trip was the Czech part.
Yeah.
Right.
And it was. I mean, it was a great trip. Don't get me wrong. It was a great experience, but you know, to come back and have to play right away, it was tiring.
Would you like to go to Australia? Because apparently,
I would. Yeah,
they're going to Australia now.
Yeah, they probably need me to go down there now, help set up or something. Get the guys, make sure they get the good coffee places.
I got to be honest with you. That when that came up, I was like, I never thought I would hear the day.
Yeah, but I mean, it's about, you know, promoting the sport, moving the sport around, you know, China. I mean, lots of different things. So I go
did you go to China with?
We went over to Beijing years before to help sort of seed things and
run a few clinics. Wasn't Rob Ramage or no, Barry Beck?
Yeah, Barry Beck was there.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, running their hockey program. But yeah, I would love to go to Australia. You know, there's a place in Australia that has these lattes in donuts. So I'm like, that's perfect for me. It fits right in.
I don't know why we haven't to this point. Clearly,
I know. I'm going to start working on that when I get home. Actually.
Lattes in donuts.
Yeah.
Are you sure there's nothing in Marta Loop that does that?
Well, that's what I'm looking at. You know, there should be. I mean, there's a lot of great places here.
Thanks, pal. This was fun.
Oh, Rob, always a pleasure.
There you go, everybody. Colin Patterson from the Flames Alumni, 89 Stanley Cup champion, and as we found out, $10,000 a little lighter in the wallet,
which I could have turned into a lot more.
That would have been it. Yeah, it would have put you over the top. Brought to you by Ski Sellers Snowboard, skisellerssnowboard.com. 76 years in Calgary, 3 locations: McLeod Trail by Chinook Center, 17th Avenue Southwest, just off of 14th Street, Bow Ridge Road, northwest by the McDonald's at the bottom of the hill from Winsport. Coming up in a little while, Ryan Pike will join us, the managing editor of Flames Nation. Just let you know right now, though, we are going to pop up our reading assignment for today. It's from an old friend, Keegan Matheson, as a matter of fact, who writes for MLB.com. Even more home runs in Toronto, ? New Dimensions could do just that. So if you're probably aware, they've done some work at Rogers Center, the old Sky Dome. They've certainly added some really neat things up top for fans in terms of the decks and things. So anyway, this story is about the dimensions of the ballpark. You always talk about a home field advantage. According to Keegan and the work that he's done on this, last year, the Jays could have seen as many as 19 more runs based on the new configuration of the ballpark. So tell me again about home field advantage. Great article. Check it out. I don't know why we don't do this for hockey. We used to do it. The old Boston Garden used to be a little bandbox and you could have big teams and things like that. But now everything's, 200 by 100 NHL standard size. Can you imagine if the new event center, if you allowed them to tailor the size of the rink, what you could do? Anyway, check it out. Don't laugh. Okay, fine. We'll talk about it. We're going right to our next guest, brought to you by the Ski Sellers Snowboard, skisellersnowboard.com. 76 years in Calgary. Check them out. Ryan Pike, the managing editor of Flames Nation, joins us. You're snickering. I'll get to the snickering in a second. Unfortunately, I feel bad because young Gavin, our producer, is searching around looking for a graphic that he thought I said I sent to him. I didn't. So Gav, slow down. It's okay, buddy. There was no, he's all upset because he can't find it. I never sent it. That's why he can't find it. Okay. You're the guru when it comes to the new building. You're the man in all of this. Do you think that NHL teams should have some latitude in terms of the size of their building and the ice surface?
That's a good question. I'm leaning no, if only because I think the challenge would be if you do it smaller, it also limits the types of events you can host. So I think they err on the side of making it a little bit more flexible and larger.
And what events would you? I mean, probably international hockey, right? Or National Hockey League, but baseball did it with the World Baseball Classic. Can't you get past it?
I think there's less organization or internal organization with baseball venues than there is for hockey.
Yeah, fair enough. But I mean, let's just think this whole thing through. So you're going to spend 3 years.
Well, I'll say this. Say this. Do you know why the New York Islanders were playing in Nassau for as long as they were after initially going into the new Brooklyn building? Because it was one of those buildings where it was built just for basketball.
Oh, yeah.
And so it was,
sure.
You couldn't see a third of the ice.
You couldn't. Same thing in Arizona. You had, when they originally went down there, they played where the Suns.
At the America West Arena.
Right. And it was a basketball facility. Yeah. But I'm talking about, I cut my teeth in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League in Estevan. And the Estevan building, Bruins building, was built the exact same dimensions as the Boston Garden was, the original Boston Garden. Meanwhile, up the road in Wilcox, home of the Notre Dame Hounds, Per Athol Murray built an Olympic-size ice surface. So in the span of an hour and a half, you could play in the biggest and the smallest rinks in Saskatchewan. And when we played in the playoffs, both teams fought like hell to get home ice advantage. They were always 7-game series, and the home team on home ice won. But can you imagine just for a second right now, if you had that flexibility, what the conversations would be like at the Saddle Dome right now about the new building? Like, what do you want to commit yourself to? Right?
Yeah.
Because the Jays, if the Jays have brought the fences in, it's to accommodate home runs and hitting. Well, it works both ways, right? It's going to accommodate it'll accommodate Aaron Judge just as much as it will Guerrero, right?
Yeah.
But if you built if the Flames said, you know what, screw it, the next event center, we're going to have ice that's going to be 190 by 85, right?
Well, you know who actually had a shorter rink than most, right?
Who's that?
The old Chicago Stadium where Darryl used to play.
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It was 15 feet shorter than most
rinks.
Right.
Right. And I believe in Finland is Finnish ice not kind of a hybrid ice between NHL and Olympic?
I believe
right.
So. There's sort of that weird middle ground.
Right. There's that weird middle ground.
The rest of Europe is 200. It was like 200 by 100, but it's just Finland. I think it depends on the venue. Too.
Yeah, it might be.
It's very much a hodgepodge.
But I would like that. I would like to be able to pick my ice surface. However, if you picked Olympic ice, let's say, if you were the Oilers and you picked Olympic ice, how do you think old McDavid and Draisaitl would like that? Right?
Or do you want to go a little bit narrower or shorter so that they can't get up to top speed?
Well, you want them to, no. Well, maybe that's what you do here. You build there you go. You build a rink, you design a rink to slow down McDavid and Draisaitl, and they're gone in 5 years or whatever, right? And then you're stuck for 35 years with the dimensions that you've chosen. Having said that, welcome to the program. How are you?
I'm good. It seems once again like there's no shortage of newsy topics in this here market.
Oh, why? What have you heard?
I mean, unfortunately, our friends at the Calgary Hitmen got eliminated by the Red Deer
Yes.
Rebels. They put up a heck of a fight. I think they were facing an uphill battle, but they had a good run. And, that Yaremchuk kid's having a good year.
He is.
He's starting to get some draft buzz. The folks at the Athletic, I think Scott Wheeler included a Hitman or two on his prospective 2024 list. So good for them. Junior hockey is very much a star-driven endeavor, both in terms of business and in terms.
I don't know
winning.
what you're speaking about, Connor Bedard. You say Game 7 tonight.
I've never heard of that player before. Is he any good?
I agree.
So I mean, those kind of things.
Yeah.
We had the Wranglers win their 50th game of the year. I believe 40 wins for some goaltender they have.
We're going to talk about him on this hit today for sure.
I think Matthew Phillips is a game-winning goal away from setting the American League single season record.
Yep.
They are, I believe, as of this morning's refresh of the standings. The Wranglers are 3 points away, either 3 points gained by them in their 3 remaining games against the Abbotsford Canucks, or 3 lost points by the Coachella Valley Firebirds away from clinching first place in the league. They get a trophy for that, and they also get a first round bye. So, it's fairly newsy. And then we have the National Hockey League Club, which are white knuckling it right now, and we'll see how long they can hold on for.
So interesting let's talk about the big club first. Are they white knuckling, or is it just kind of not official yet? I kind of came away from that game. I started the show today, dude, and I don't know how many times all of us have said it combined. If we all put a quarter in, we could probably build the new arena. But in so many ways, Saturday's game was the season in a nutshell, right? Like another one of those nutshell games. Having said that, the only thing that I would grant them is this was not, Joe Smith, backup goaltender in Pawtucket, who came up to make his first NHL start, spun on his head and spit wooden nickels. Demko was good.
And it's also, this, second game in a row, second game in 9 days against arguably your biggest regular season rival.
Yeah.
You can make a case for LA. You can make a case for Edmonton as well in terms of, but I think
in terms of playoff, they haven't played anybody any more than they played.
I think historically, I think in terms of just important regular season games,
absolutely.
Johnny Gaudreau makes his NHL debut and scores a goal against the Canucks.
Assisted by?
Who was it?
Chris Breen.
Chris, the Breen Giant.
Yep.
Good man, Chris
Breen.
Very, very
former captain of the Providence Bruins.
Very tall man.
Very tall man.
6'7"?
Yeah, something like that.
Built like the Green Giant.
That's exactly.
The Green Giant, because hockey locker rooms are not particularly creative with their nicknames.
No, they're not.
It was perfect. I couldn't think of a better name for that guy. But the Flames had the line brawl in 2013 that really, I think, crystallized their identity and really made them, I think, a team rather than a bunch of guys playing with the same sweater. They had.
I'll do you one better, because to me it's more important than anything is the Trevor Linden retirement. That was the first time I'd ever seen a visiting team go across and shake the hand of an honor.
Because one guy wearing the C wearing 12 said, "Boys, we're gonna do this." And everyone's like, "Okay."
And now it's fairly common, and I like it. But it was started by the Flames, right, in Vancouver.
Yeah. So a lot of really important, like capital I important things have happened for the Flames against the Canucks. But if you're the Canucks, you a week prior, you felt like you let one get away.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they particularly love the high sticking call in the third period, but they also got scored on. Like if they have that penalty, if they kill a penalty against a Flames power play that wasn't particularly great in that game, they probably feel better about it, but they felt like they wouldn't get away. And they come in, they have the Hirose kid on the blue line who is very good. Aiden McDonough, who didn't play on Saturday but played in the previous game, one of their up and comers. Like, they have a lot. They put in basically, a lineup full of guys pushing for jobs or guys who they have really high hopes for. And they played well, and they took it to the Flames early. The Flames were habitually flat, and the Canucks went, "Oh, if these guys are going to play like this, let's just win on them." And they took advantage of some turnovers, they took advantage of some penalties, they took advantage of some sloppy play, and the Flames for the first, I'd say, 35 to 40 minutes were the second best team in the ice. And then they, for the umpteenth time, came out of the locker room in the third period going, "Oh crap, it's 2-0." And give the Flames credit. They are in a position where they absolutely had to get something out of that game. A win would have been much better for them. But they needed to get something out of that game to have any chance in hell of staying alive through the weekend. And they pulled it off. Their power play wasn't very good. They 5-on-5, they were the better team in the third period. But in the first half of the game, it was sort of a saw off. And I thought the first 2/3 of the game, they did not play a very good road game. And then the third period, they played a very good road game, and they salvaged a point. But how many times have we, had this conversation of what, I was talking in the other room with the gentleman doing social and clips.
Jack,
very nice young man. But we were talking, and he was clipping Pinder and Boomer clips, and he was brought up the 52 1-goal games this year, and they've only won 20. So they've gotten, in 1-goal games, they've gotten, I think it's I think they're 20-16 and 16 in 1-goal games. If you include empty goals that, games that were 2-1 and then they scored an empty netter. So they're not really 1-goal games, because it was a 1-goal game with goalies involved. So 52, 120 of them got nothing out of 16, got 1 point out of another 16. That is an a tremendous amount of money left on the table.
It is, and I think it speaks to something that Daryl identified early on. I don't know if we all appreciated it necessarily when he said it, because I think we were all kind of thinking, well, he's being critical, but the team doesn't have a game breaker.
Nope. The way they play, I mean, you could say Toffoli's the closest thing they have to a game breaker.
Yep.
But the way they play a very structured, grinding game. And it relies on consistency and discipline. And both those things are really, really tough, especially if you're not getting the results that you think you should be getting. And so, if you look at the best games they played, I think I would point to a couple of the games they played against Vegas. I think they were unfortunate to lose, but I think they played very well against Vegas. But I was thinking specifically that the home game they played against Los Angeles, the 2-1 win. And they were LA just never really got going, and the Flames were, they figured out a way to not let them get going. And then they said, okay, we're going to dictate the way this game is played. And we've seen that at times, but I think we've only really seen that for full games, maybe less than 10 times. Well,
to get the results, right? Like I would look at that Boston game or the Rangers game after. I mean, there was 2 games after the All-Star break in which they were, one was a really good road game. Can make an argument they deserved a better fate, but the best team in the history of the regular season, 63 wins by the Boston Bruins. They dominated them at home, still managed to find a way not to win.
Yeah. And, if I think the big challenge, like obviously on the website, when this eventually turns into what we all think it will be, we'll do some obituaries. You don't do obituaries on a patient that's still alive, unfortunately, but that'll come. But I think one of the themes will be, the Flames were an excellent to borderline elite possession team.
Yeah.
But the thing they struggled with is the last 10 feet in either zone. They're the middle 180 feet. Excellent. Like they they're when they're at their best, they transition well, they cycle the puck, they hold on to the puck, they're patient, they're just very exacting and tactical.
Yeah.
But I think the challenge is the mistakes they have made this season in the last 10 feet and the first 10 feet have completely made what the gains they've made in the other 180 not really mean as much.
I think that's a really astute observation. I think it's the best way to put it. The start in 10 and the finishing 10.
And I think that's if you're a fan of the club, I think that's probably that might be one of the things that makes them the most frustrating, because the shape of their game is excellent. The details in those 2 areas though aren't.
Yeah. I have brought this up to you before. I have no way of proving my theory, but whenever anybody brings up their 16 overtime losses or shootout losses or the 1-goal games, I mean, that was as fun in overtime. It was weird in overtime, 90 seconds of nothing. And then the last was just, let's set everybody's hair on fire. And it was fantastic. I contend the one thing I would always want to know about this particular season was, could Matthew Phillips have made a difference in that scenario? I don't think Matthew Phillips was necessarily going to make a difference in a big, heavy game like the LA game. But in a game like that...
Case in point, Vancouver benched Kuzmenko for the better part of the third period. First guy over the boards for the shootout.
Right.
And I mean, Kuzmenko, is he a player? Is he a complete NHL player? I'd say no.
Right.
Is he a player that could help a team like Vancouver win? Yes.
Yeah.
Is Vancouver, a team that's not currently in the playoff mix and hasn't been in a while? Do they have the luxury of being able to address a guy like that? Oh yeah, of course. It's a sort of a different situation. But I think in terms of just sort of figuring out the roles that you want to fill on your team.
But your power play wasn't good enough when it needed to be. Again, that astute line of the 10 feet. Why wasn't Matthew Phillips given a legitimate opportunity? Again, he may turn out to be Austin Czarnik, and that's not a knock against Austin Czarnik, who's a really nice kid, really good kid.
And carved out a pretty good pro career, all things considered.
Right, but isn't a full-time NHLer.
Yeah.
And maybe that's going to be what happens to Matt Phillips in 2 or 3 years. People can go, see, you were wrong. I might be wrong, but that's the one thing that haunts me about this year.
Yeah. Well, there's let's do the quick math. 23 full-time gigs in the NHL, 32 teams. That's about 700 or so NHL jobs.
Yeah.
And so you can make a good case that Matthew Phillips is one of the top 800 players in the world in the sport he plays.
Yeah.
That the last 700 gigs are the toughest gigs to get and keep.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
there's plenty of really, really good players who circle the airport, like Crash Davis.
Yeah, and no,
Circle
great
the airport, can't land.
Right.
There's plenty of guys like that. There's plenty of them who have been in this organization, and
Right.
some of it is, the guys on Barnburn have talked about, could Phillips turn into another Marty St. Louis? Could be, but Marty St. Louis, when I was here, when he was here, Marty St. Louis didn't blow the doors off. Marty St. Louis made it very easy to get rid of Marty St. Louis.
100%.
I would make a case that in terms of guys who aren't at that level yet, Phillips, his boxcars, his performance at the level below has been much better than Marty St. Louis was.
And I go back to, and not everybody agrees with this take. And, what you have really illustrated too, by the way, is that, when you listen to Daryl Sutter and you play his system, analytically, it can be effective for the most part. The tail end, beginning, the goalies, I think, were a different story, which is a long way of me getting to, I just, I wonder about the role of the modern day coach. If the modern day coach doesn't have to be more of a teacher than he has been in the past, or more open to players. I think the one thing you can say about Brad Treliving, if you coach for Brad Treliving, you get a really healthy say in player conversations.
Yeah,
that's been Hartley didn't like Berchi, so Berchi was gone. Right.
And again, Berchi, he made it easy for them to not keep him around. I vividly think back to the Brian Burke 200-foot or there's 3 zones you got to play in comment he made when we asked him about him. And I think in 2014 or 2015.
But I'm not trying to out anybody, and I don't say this trying to be a dink about this. But did you or somebody at Flames Nation not write a story about the compelling argument to trade Michael Backlund like 7-8 years ago when he was a youngster?
Yeah, there was compelling.
That happened. So that's my point. Is you're right about Berchi, but the job of Barb Hartley wasn't to run him out of town. It was to make it work. Yeah. And I think the job of Daryl Sutter wasn't to say he's too small. It was to make it work. At least that's how I think.
I think it depends. Not knowing what.
And again, I'm not trying to be
not knowing what the marching orders are from up on high. I mean, the optics seem to be, especially, the marching orders I believe Brad was given was get in the mix quick. And so a lot of the things they did were early on trying to make moves to turn the rebuild into, okay, you're close. Okay, you're closer. Okay. And sort of get that progression very quickly.
I agree.
And in that case though, like if you think, like, say, if you're the 14-15 Flames, you're the Find Away Flames, you have some runway to
did that team damage this organization more than we know? Did it not give one of the most incredible false sense of security?
I think the case be made because I think I love this phrase, and I always appreciate Jay Feaster for introducing it. Intellectual honesty.
Yes,
being clear about what are you doing here and what are you.
Yep.
And I think the biggest challenge is when you're winning, even if you're winning ugly.
Yeah.
You the rose colored glasses probably look extra rosy, and when you're losing, even if you're right there, everything seems like the sky is falling. Like,
I agree.
It's a results-driven industry. So I think a lot of time it's really tough to divorce yourself from the results and get into the process. And I think that's probably one of the things that, has really driven the rise of the analytics movement in professional sports, having people be like, okay, but why are you losing? Like if the idea is,
agreed.
If the idea is you're losing, you're wildly outplaying, but your power play is no good. Okay, that's a reason. You can fix that. That could be tactics. That could be personnel. Like you can figure out what you don't have.
Yeah.
And I think the big challenge is, I'd say, I think the big challenge is overcorrecting, because we've seen the Flames coaching staff, Bob Hartley was a taskmaster. Okay. Players stopped responding to that. Okay. So you get Gulletson, who's much more of a player's coach. But there's, we had the same thing after Daryl left. When Daryl stopped being the head coach, you go to Jim Playfair, who was much more of a player's coach than Daryl was. And then, okay, that's not quite working. So you overcorrect another direction and
bring in Mike Keenan.
Yeah, bring in Mike Keenan. And then, okay, that doesn't work as well. So then you go and you bring in Brent Sutter. Okay, how is that working? Well, it doesn't work as well. And then you go to Hartley. And then it's sort of been the oscillation between hard asses and
players coaches.
Yeah, and I think now especially the role of I think the Flames have been very good at recruiting and developing really smart young players and very smart young coaches. I mean, Ryan Huska is an up and comer. He interviewed, I believe, this past offseason was in Detroit. He was a runner up for that position from what I'm told.
Yeah.
And, he's got a reputation. Mitch Love is probably going to win or be a strong contender for his second consecutive Coach of the Year award, coaching the best team in the regular season, a team that I think they lost something like, they scored 240 goals the year before. 140 of those goals walked out the door in the between the start of between the playoffs and the start of the regular season, and they're better than they were a year ago. With on paper, what should be a worse team, and a lot of things went well. And a lot of guys developed well. Cale McLean, another guy they brought up. So I think that's my long way of saying I'm really curious if they can get creative, because we've seen, the advent of associate coaches. We've seen the advent of maybe young head coaches. We've seen the model in hockey ops with the new GM and, a
president of hockey
ops
operations,
or vice president of hockey ops. That the Flames did that with Brian Burke. They had Brian Burke, and Brian really wanted to bring in the only guy he talked to for the job formally was Brad Treliving. And he told this story. Basically, told Ken King, "Hey, I'll interview him. He'll come meet you guys. If you guys hate him, I'll talk to somebody else. But this is the guy.
That's the guy I want." Yeah.
And so, but they thought it was really important. Beforehand, like they had Brian on as an interim guy, and they just like the idea of having Brian as a resource. Brian knew everybody, so it would help if he needed anybody to help him connect with people. But just having somebody who's done the job and having a veteran guy, and I think potentially, could you see a young head coach with like a Kirk Muller as associate coach? Maybe you do want to have like a veteran head coach with a really young staff that he can develop. Maybe. I think a lot of it depends on what you want to do, but I think a lot of the conversation will stem from the whole what went wrong thing from this season, because the thing I think that makes me anxious is the idea of overcorrecting, where it's like, okay, you have a team that's I think 4th in the league in expected goals percentage, but they got bad goaltending and they couldn't finish. Okay, the last 10 feet. Make sure you don't throw away the 180 feet that worked really, really well. And how do you figure out ways to really address the last 10 and the first 10? Because if it's just sort of, you need to make a tactical tweak on your blue line group, or how your forward support your defense or whatever, that fixes one end. And then if you fix one or the other, you're probably good enough to make it. You're probably good enough to be a very good team. It's just I think there's the challenge is lots of teams are unlucky in one way or the other. The Flames are unlucky in both. I don't think unlucky absolves them of the mistakes they made in those areas.
No.
And I think that'll be the challenge, sort of divorcing the puck luck from the gaffes, from the mistakes, from the structural stuff.
Your wording, I like your wording a lot, because the overcorrection part, really hit home. And I've been chewing on this for, a week now, which was Daryl Sutter becoming the all-time, coaching record for games by the Flames at 401, and that's in two stints. And one guy
and two part-time years too.
And the one guy did it for 400, who's considered arguably the best coach here in Calgary. But the organization's been in Calgary for 40 years, and 400 is your benchmark.
Yeah. And since Bob Johnson left, they've never had a coach for more than 4 years.
Right. And I keep going back to John Cooper. Why are you going to John Cooper? Because John Cooper, if I remember correctly, was a young available coach in the American Hockey League when Hartley was hired. And I'm not saying they shouldn't have taken Hartley.
I think he was still in Syracuse back then. I think he was early in his crunch phase.
But I think people
Tampa was bringing him along.
But I think people knew who he was, right? Yeah. That sort of thing. Now he's been in Tampa for 10 years. Is he a hard ass? Is he a player's coach?
A little of both.
A little bit of both. I keep going back, and I had this conversation with Matt Larkin from the Daily Faceoff last week, and I just had it with Patterson, so I don't know why I wouldn't have it with you. I think the secret to coaching now is to get somebody in the middle, and you really rely on your leadership group. I think your leadership group has more of a role now to play as a communicator of team structure, right? And that's how you have longevity as a coach. You don't burn out yelling and screaming and all and being too friendly.
Well, I mean, all due respect to the guys involved, but Glenn Gulletson didn't play high-end professional hockey. So I think, and I think that was the problem that Jim Playfair had at times, where you have at some points guys who haven't played or guys who didn't play a ton have credibility problems, which it happens.
Cooper's a lawyer.
Yeah, but I think the other thing is, like, if you're John Cooper, you go into that room and you can be like, hey, I've coached all of you before. Like, I don't like,
Yeah.
if you're an AHL player, you're not going to go to management and be like, who the hell is this guy to
Yeah.
tell me what to do?
Yeah.
So if you're the Flames, you can bring in guys who, all due respect to them as coaches,
Yep.
did not have great professional careers. I mean,
Yep.
you know, Ryan Huska as a coach, he's an exceptional coach. He's one of my favorite people to talk about hockey with, because he's just got a mind for it.
Yep.
So does Love, so does Huska,
Yeah.
or so does Cale McLean.
Cale McLean. Yeah.
And they all come in with a really unique perspective. And sure, they didn't have a lot of success as pros, but I think they have a really good perspective and some self-awareness about what didn't work for them and what can work at other levels.
Yeah.
And, you know, Ryan Huska, you know, if you're an AHL player, if you go to your manager and go, if you think anyone went to Brad and went, I don't know, this guy didn't really do much in the NHL. I mean, you know, why am I listening to him? No, you're going, okay, I'm 20, 21, 22 years old. This guy has some success at other levels of coaching. I'm going to listen to this guy. And then they had success. And then I think gradually, if the culture of the team is, we don't care who you are, we just like good ideas. And then your coaching staff is full of, like, I'll say this, I think it helps the Flames. I mean, you know, I'll say this, the areas where the Flames have done well, I think for tactics, are the blue line group, because they've sort of had a hodgepodge of guys, and the penalty kill. And both of them are the things that Huska's in charge of. And both of them have a lot of young guys that Huska coach at other levels. So I don't think Dylan Dubé goes into the PK, or Mangiapane or any of the blue liners goes there and going like, I don't know why he wants us to do the check press. You know, what does this guy know? They go and going, well, I had this guy a couple years ago and he was awesome. I'm going to listen to him because we had success. Or he made me better. And I think if you have an entire locker room full of guys who are indoctrinated to that type of thinking, I think it makes things gel together a lot better. That said, there's a lot of different ways to be successful. I mean, you know, I'm sure there's still a lot of really, you know, hard ass coaches in the NHL who sort of are part of the old school who have success. I don't know how much longevity they have, because, you know, like you said, if your entire, I think Bob Hartley is a good example. Bob Hartley was brought in to teach a very young group with very little amounts of NHL experience and established talent how to be pros. And so you can say, you know, hey, we need you to play this way, work hard, habits. That'll get you so far. But once you hit the ceiling of where hard work and habits can get you, and you go, okay, coach, we're kind of bumping up our heads against this. What do we do? And his trump card is to say, work harder. At a certain point, you know, if someone says to you, Rob, you need to work harder, you're like, that's your go-to. So you need to have something more than that. And similarly, you know, I think if once you have, you know, a group that has good habits and has a good mindset and has, you know, an orientation towards that kind of success, I think it makes it a lot easier for them to be open-minded about this thing. But it needs to sort of be something that happens at all the different levels, so that by the time you get to the NHL level, you're not going, well, what's going on here? You have to be sort of used to it.
So are you alluding to there being a coaching change this offseason?
I have no idea.
I have no idea. I have no idea either.
I think Frank Saravalli on various programs, if it's alluded to, I think on the DFO rundown, I think he alluded to, like, there's a chance neither of them is back. You know, I personally don't think that both the current coach and the current GM are back next season.
And the Kingmaker's the owner.
It's one or the other.
The Kingmaker's
could be neither.
The Kingmaker's the owner. That's gonna go right up to the top. What Murray Edwards wants to do.
And you know, if I signed a head coach to a 2-year extension, and then it became evident to me during the year before the extension that it might not be a good fit, if I think I can win more or be more financially successful with somebody else, I'll just cut a check. If
I want to be your friend.
Well, that's the thing though. If someone comes to me with a plan saying, okay, here's a roadmap for getting the team back on track. But the catch is, it's a good plan, but you need to cut a check. If the plan's good enough, I'm cutting a check. But the plan's got to be good. Especially if I'm also cutting a check for a building that's probably going to be 9 figures. I don't want to be spending too much of my money all. So, you know,
I'm sorry. Did you just say 9 figures?
That's what it was last time.
Yes, you're right. Sorry.
9 figures.
Okay. Sorry. 10 figures is where we would have.
Oh yeah. No.
Okay.
I don't think anyone's cutting a check.
Remember, they told me I did not have to do math when I came back, so that took me a while. Completely different topic. If the NBA play-in rules were adopted, this is a preview tonight, is it not?
I think so. This is what, team 9 and 10?
Yep. Is anybody talking about this? And I'm not, Ryan. I'm not promoting it. I'm not saying, oh, the locals aren't in, so let's build them a path. I happen to notice that the Raptors are playing on Wednesday against Chicago. It's a play-in game. It's in the NBA. Is anybody talking about that right now?
I think probably more in the media than in the Board of Governors. I think the current commissioner, and more than likely a fair amount of the Board of Governors, if it's coming from the commissioner, probably like it the way it is. I mean, if you're a traditionalist, I mean, 16 teams, 8-8. It's the math is easy. It's the top half of every
okay,
group.
but let me debunk that for a second. If you're a traditionalist in 16 teams, remember 16 teams got in when there were 21 teams.
Oh yeah.
Now so it's gone from a real healthy percentage, I'll let you do the math, to 50%.
Yeah.
Right. So don't talk to me about tradition. Let me talk to you about business. Let's assume, because I do not see Rogers continuing on the path, but in the next television negotiation, does TSN want a play-in game? Does TSN want, because when does the season end? Friday?
Yeah.
So there's nothing.
And it only ends Friday because Nashville had a water main break and they had to reschedule a bunch of games.
Right. So there's nothing on Saturday, right?
Yeah.
So if you're TSN, yeah, we'll pay you, but not unlike the NFL and the NBA negotiations is, we also want to create a little programming here. So we would like playing games on Saturday.
I think that was, we talked about tradition. The All-Star game used to be a hallowed tradition of, whatever. And then someone came up with the cool idea of like, hey, it'd be cool. We like 3-on-3 overtime. We talked into doing 3-on-3 in the regular season. Everyone loves it. Let's do 3-on-3 in the All-Star game. That'd be kind of wacky and fun. And so I
contend they stole that from Colin Patterson, our previous guest, and Perry Bearzan, the old SO 3-on-3 pond hockey.
They don't care whether they find good ideas.
No, they do not. No, they do not.
But I think that's one of the things. Like I think the challenge would be, I think if you tell them, hey, the All-Star game doesn't count for the standings for anyone, literally nothing is achieved by this outside of having goofy fun. I think it makes it easy to double down on making it 3-on-3 or having a draft or doing whatever, because you're like, it doesn't matter anyway, so let's just have some fun with it.
Right.
I think the biggest challenge for the NHL is they feel the regular season is hallowed, and it's like, when I'm on team keep it the way it is, or keep
me
it very
too.
similar.
And I know I'm going to get skewed on this, but me too. I'm building you a scenario in which TSN or whoever, they just did those deals. So the next one up is the Canadian deal. So that's why I'm picking on Bell. Yeah. But Bell goes, you know what? Now, if you give us 2 games at the end of the season on a Saturday, which we don't normally own, right? That's a Rogers and CBC property. But if you're going to give us play-in games, we won't like it, but we'll damn well watch it. And you and I both know those would be big ratings games.
Yeah. Hey, look at the World Baseball Classic,
right?
It means absolutely nothing. Doesn't have a lot of built-in prestige outside of what they built for themselves. But people, that's gonna be a point of viewing for people next year or next time they do it based on how well this one went.
Sure.
So I think.
And can I charge playoff prices for the tickets?
If you can sell them, I think that'd be the experiment.
You don't think
NHL teams used to not do very well pricing for home dates, but then, because they found that they can fill the building if they make tiers of home dates and say, oh, well,
dynamic pricing.
Yeah. So I think this would be an extension of that, and B, you need to test it out. But I think as much as I feel we have an 82 game play-in round already, if you can sell it as, how is this better? Like if I'm like hardcore hockey fans like me, like you, we're going to watch it regardless. You're not going to bristle. Like, we'd be watching regardless. Like the last weekend of the season, the first weekend of the playoffs, we're watching because it's what we do.
I guess I'm more influenced by Thursday Night Football. Like, if you strip all of the BS away, who thinks Thursday Night Football is good? Nobody, right? It's Sunday to Thursday. Well, maybe the back end of it's okay, but nobody wants to play, in that compacted schedule. They had god-awful games for years. And then now it's on a freaking over-the-top provider. But man, they got the money for it. And they do things based on the money. And it seems to me, didn't they add a play-in in the NFL this year too?
I can't remember.
I think they did, and I think ESPN got that.
I think part of the expansion of the wild card was a response, both in baseball and in football, to money. So
Okay, no playing for NFL. I apologize. They added extra teams. Is that what they did?
I think they expanded the wild card.
I think
there's
that's
more
what
wild
it
card
was.
teams now.
Okay.
But yeah, it's essentially that. But it's like, okay, more
Extra
teams,
playoffs.
more
Yeah.
teams staying longer, so the games are more meaningful longer. Like I think that was one of the ingenious things about adding the overtime loss, because take away the overtime loss, we're not even talking about a playoff race here.
Oh no.
And
I laugh because people complain about it. Well, what do you want? I mean, ultimately, you're a business, so you want your team. This is the best possible scenario for the Calgary Flames. If you're not going to make the playoffs, is to have every game meaningful down to the end.
Yeah,
and God help you,
have your fans have to rely on us for complicated math,
right? Which I've proven I cannot do. No, and again, I cannot stress this enough. I am not advocating for it. I am not. I like it the way it is. I have no problem with. Well, I mean, I'm not sure I like the divisional stuff.
I mean, part of it is like the AHL wanted to have expanded playoffs because they want to have more games because it helps guys get developmental reps. But a lot of like the AHL for a lot of things, is a test bed for the National Hockey League, same as the East Coast League. So
is it? What's going on down there? Did you hear like Chicago's now going independent?
Yeah.
Apparently
but even just the idea, like, the Wranglers are fighting for a bye. They got a first round bye in the Pacific Division because the AHL wants to have teams playing a lot and also wants to experiment a bit.
Right.
And so if right now, I mean, if it weren't for this race, I mean, I don't think there'd be a lot of fan interest in the Coachella Valley team because they're so far away. And, you only see them a handful of times. So I don't think there's a real rivalry built yet.
Sure.
But things like this help.
Yeah.
But you're also going, okay, if you're, the last couple of home games, you're thinking, all right, so if the Wranglers win this one, win one or two more, they get a bye and they get home ice advantage and they get this, that, and the other thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's some stakes. That's some stakes that weren't there before.
Right.
And I think experimenting with building those kind of things in at the minor league level can do a lot to see what works and what doesn't, and what does and doesn't move the needle in terms of fan interest, in terms of ticket moving, all kinds of stuff.
Well, I'm right there with you. I really feel that the NHL's dropped the ball on using the American Hockey League the proper way. The American Hockey League should have been playing 10-minute 3-on-3 overtime for the last 2 years.
The ECHL is playing 7.
Right.
Isn't that weird?
No,
it's kind of fun though, right?
That's what you should be, right? You should. I mean, I remember when the 04-05 lockout, I went up to Edmonton and watched the Roadrunners because they put in the fat blue lines, and I wanted to see what that was going to be like. Right?
How was that?
It was good. I mean, if you're a smart defenseman, a Letang or an Anderson or somebody like that, or at that time Lidstrom, it's just extra space, right? Because you're still on side. But we for whatever reason, the minute you say, "Oh my God, we're going to do this," and God bless him, Craig Button has the ultimate comeback to this. Oh, I'm old school. How old school? You still want the Rover? Like, how far are we going back here? Right? You want the Rover? Let's get the Rover. I'm all for the Rover. Hey, bring the Rover back.
Hey,
I just think that the American Hockey League, I think there's two things going on. I think there's a coup going on in the American Hockey League, from what I gather.
There's some teams that do not like current leadership for some reason.
Right. And one's now going to be an independent team. What the hell? Why? Like, it's not like somebody in AAA baseball goes, enough of this.
And that means we're going to get at least one shared affiliate. It'll be weird because I hate shared affiliates.
Share affiliates does. And you know what? And then the Chicago Wolves will be saying, yeah, sure, we'll take your player. But who is it? Right? Who do we want? You can bet that the Chicago Wolves will become the Wade Redden depository, that where you want to go and shed some salary and dump a guy in the American League, they're all going to end up playing for the Chicago Wolves.
I'd be fascinated to sort of get a look at revenues for AHL team, because I bet you Chicago's up near the top, if not at the top, and they probably feel emboldened to call their shots.
Oh, no, 100% they do. Them and Hershey. You watch. Hershey's the next team that'll do it too.
Yeah.
And Hershey's always been the history on that is there's a
because Hershey's what, Washington?
Yeah.
They
used to be.
That's a long-standing relationship.
That's a long-standing, but they used to be an independent with an affiliation.
I think Providence probably does pretty well.
Providence would be another one, yeah, for sure.
Hartford, maybe. There's a few New England teams that don't have their own full-time teams that do pretty well there. It has some good in-market cachet.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the one here and good cachet before we get to that. Numbers. Exactly how good is the season that Dustin Wolf is putting up?
I'd say generational. He's very good. I'll give the Blue Liners in front of him credit. I mean, the team defense in the first month or so of the season was sort of all over the place, and then they've really done a good job tidying up. They've had some injuries on the back end. They've had some guys float back and forth. Dennis Gilbert, arguably the most consistent defenseman, has been in the NHL since January. So, I mean, they lost probably their most reliable guy, but, Ilya Slavyov has taken a big step. I think, D. Simone's game has really steadied out after sort of being a little bit shaky early on.
Mm-hmm.
Nick Milosh has really taken a step. I think he was out for a little bit with a minor injury, but now he's back. Like they've gotten a lot of stuff out of the veterans, and I think some of their young guys are taking some big steps. I mean, I think Poirier's maybe, Jeremy Poirier's maybe another half season playing, showing up his defensive game to be pretty good. I think Kuznetsov's getting there. I don't think his offensive game isn't quite as strong. So I think there might be a little bit less appetite to try him out. But I mean, they've been working on a lot of things, and I'll give Mitch Love credit. Like Mitch Love, if you have a bad game or two, he just pulls you out. He doesn't care who you are.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're Jeremy Poirier had a couple of rough games, out of the lineup, and a couple guys at that. So I think that's a bold thing to do, and you can do it when you have the respect and the trust of your room, because you don't expect no one's going to go, oh, Poirier's not playing tomorrow. Oh, this guy's an idiot. They go, oh, Poirier's not playing tomorrow. Okay, I get it.
Yeah.
And if you do that so I think a lot of things have gone well, and they haven't had to. I think they're one of the top offensive teams in the league, and they're one of the top defensive teams in the league. They've gotten better both defensively and offensively, despite losing a lot of established players last year who knew the guys, knew the system, and knew the team. And I mean, that's a credit to that group. They've done a lot of different things, and they have a guy at the back of down in the net who they trust implicitly, and who's really repaid that trust. I mean, he's a 932 save percentage right now.
Leads the league
by a country mile.
And the same thing in goals against, does he not?
Yeah, he leads the league. I think that there's one guy ahead of him in goals against.
Oh, okay.
But barely. He's like a hair ahead of him in goals.
But he's
against.
ahead in wins. He's ahead in save percentage. He's lapping the field, to use some terminology.
Hershey Bears goaltender Hunter Shepard, who's played 31 games, has a 205 goals against. Wolves at 208. Shepard has played 31 games. Dustin Wolf has more wins, 10 more wins than Hunter Shepard has games played. He is currently the league leader in games played, minutes played, shutouts, second in goals against, outright leader in wins. His 932 save percentage is I think 0.7 ahead of Brandon Boosie, who's Providence Bruins goalie, who's up with the big club right now. Granted, he's up for the big club because it's weird. It's late in the season; they're getting weird and sitting guys. But I mean, he was the best goaltender in the American League by a fair bit last year, and he's having a better season in almost every respect this year. It's working, and we'll see what happens. But I mean, easy kid to root for, easy team to root for. They play a really fun style of game, and we talked about this in the past. I'm fascinated to see how their postseason looks, because if there's any justice in the world, that first home game they get in, at this rate, probably round 2 against whoever the weakest remaining team in their division, that building should be hopping.
It should be, and I think it will be, to be perfectly honest. And I would hope that they do them the solid. I'm not trying to create work for my friends on the ice crew, but I hope they put the W in the middle.
I think that's the plan.
Okay.
I've been told that's the plan.
Yeah.
If there's only one team playing, the team
logo
is still
goes in
playing
the
is
middle.
going to go up.
Good.
So
no, I look at Dustin Wolf, and I'm seeing things. You use the term generational. I've seen things from people who say that, he's arguably the best player in the world in his league. When you say something like that, and Connor McDavid's having this kind of season, it gets my attention. It seems to me he's forcing an issue here. Like they're going to have to do something for next year.
I think they're in a situation right now where, they have options. And if you're another team, like teams are always looking for goaltenders.
Right.
So let's say you're let's say they hire you as GM for the Flames because they want someone who works cheap.
Yep.
They hire you.
Nobody works cheaper than me.
They hire you and they go, what do you think? I think if I call you and ask about Wolf, ask if he's available, you start chuckling, be like, no. And you go, how about the other guy? So I think they're.
Which is the other guy?
Dan Vladar. Dan Vladar signed for 2 years at 2.2. He's a good goalie. He's still young. Yeah. And the only knock you have against him right now is sometimes he's a little bit inconsistent, but he also doesn't play a lot. Yep. So if I'm a GM and I'm trying to sell another team on giving me a second or third round pick or some kind of a roster player who can help out my whatever on for Vladar. I go, hey, only thing he didn't do is like, he's not the guy that the coach trusts as much. And it's because Markstrom had a bigger body of work heading in. And so if you're the head coach and you're going, we got to pick one guy and we're going to go with this guy, because you can easily make a case to go with Markstrom, and it's not anything negative about Vladar.
Yeah.
And so I think the fact that Vladar did not have an implosion, Vladar was simply good, but wasn't as good as Markstrom has been or could be.
Yeah.
And also didn't have the big contract. I think that's an easy sales pitch. And I think every team's always looking for goaltenders. And if you're anywhere else, if you're San Jose, if you're Detroit, if I can think of probably a dozen teams that would look hard at Vladar and go, well,
easily
we could use
the dollars.
If we're tandeming, if the idea is that, if the plan was always, you sign, when you sign Dan Vladar to a 2-year extension, you don't know that Dustin Wolf is going to go off this year. You think maybe he will, maybe he won't. We want to give ourselves some wiggle room. So you sign Dan Vladar for 2 years at a contract you can easily move, and then Dustin Wolf goes nuts. So I think that'd be one of the positions I look at for potential tweaks, not because anything went especially wrong. I think there's tons of things that contributed to the goaltending being what it is, but I think you're looking for reasons to move this kid up.
Do we have to explain or have a conversation about why it's Vladar and not Markstrom?
A no move contract.
Yeah. Thank you.
It's and I think he was,
and it's a bigger contract and all of those sort of things. And okay.
And I think
thank you.
Don't, not to tell tales out of school, but I think it's come out. Markstrom's wife had a baby.
Yep.
It's their first kid. I have no children. I can only imagine from talking to friends and family members of mine, the level of, regardless of what your job is, the level of apprehension you have heading into that. I think there's tons of things that you don't think that will impact you at your job that do, for various reasons. I don't want to say that's the reason, because I don't know. And to be honest,
but I think he's part of the reason you're even in it at this point.
Yeah.
This play in the last month, right? I think is fair.
He was challenged to step up, and in a time of the year where he had to, he did.
Yeah.
And,
so that begs the question though, Ryan, if it's still Markstrom next year, is that enough for Wolf?
I think it depends on who else is in the system, because the thing with Wolf is next year, Wolf is waiver exempt again. He's waiver exempt for a year after that too. So let's just say, you sign a quad A guy and say, okay, here's the plan, boys. We're going to sit down and say, here's the plan, 82 games for a plan. We're going to give Markstrom 45 to 50. So our plan is, Wolf, we're going to play you this many times a week, a month, whatever. And maybe, Markstrom gets hot. So you go to the other guy you go to him a bit more. So you send Wolf down for a week to get him a couple games in, send him down for a weekend. You have that ability. And so you basically need to have a goalie, the other goalie of the AHL. Maybe it's Oscar Dansk, maybe it's someone else that you feel comfortable with just bringing up for a weekend, being like, okay, you're backing up. We're putting Wolf in for this weekend. Markstrom's going to start up here. We need you to sit to back up Markstrom for a weekend. I think they have the waiver exemption to do that with Wolf for the next 2 years. If something happens with Dan Vladar where he's moved elsewhere, I think they definitely look at that possibility, because you want him playing a ton. And maybe you put him in the NHL and he has a bad first weekend, so you send him down for a couple weeks to just, ragdoll the AHL, then you send him back up, he gets another couple starts. Like, I think with the way Boston had the benefit / curse of a lot of goalie injuries, so they kind of had to do this. But if you look at how they did things with Vladar, with Jeremy Swayman, with Linus Ullmark, with a lot of the young goaltenders there, they were using guys on the same week in one place and the other place. They were sort of shifting guys around. And you have that ability when your farm team's in Providence, you can just bring a guy up. You have that ability when your farm team's down the hallway. And so, I think goaltending is, if you're looking at any one position to go, I wonder what they do this year. I think goaltending this offseason might be the thing to look at, because I think there's a lot of really interesting things they could do.
Okay. One last one on the Wranglers. And we mentioned his name last week, but it popped again for me this week, is Connor Zary, who
19th in scoring. Connor Zary.
Yeah. You brought up, and I think it was the conversation we had last week about Poirier that might still be, half a season away. What about Zary next fall?
I think he gets a long look. What I would do, and it's me, I'm not in charge, I don't coach. I'm really curious to see how Zary and Pelche and Coronado look in camp and how they progressed. Because, I would say if it was up to me, maybe you put them all on a line together for some preseason games and see how they operate as a unit. Maybe you split them up into, playing with a different established forwards to sort of see, is there a big gap between them and the
Zari's center, right?
Zari can play center or wing. He's
Okay.
been used to doing a little of both. He's sort of, I would say he's sort of more of a Dubé than
Okay.
the other two guys. I
Okay.
think, but he's done both fairly well, and his ability to play both has given him a lot of flexibility. He's playing on the wing right now, primarily with Cole Schwint and Emilio Peterson, but he's sort of bounced around a bit. The nice thing with Schwint is he can play wing or center, and he's a right shot. So if you can use strong side faceoffs with both of them. So Schwint's another one of those guys I think that could be kind of a dark horse. His offense isn't great this year, but I think the challenge, a lot of guys don't have great offense, once they get to that level. But I mean, I think if you look at what made Dewar work as well this year, I think Dewar sort of figured out, especially, late last season, early this season, what made him tick at the AHL level, and just focused on being good at the things he was good at. And I think, with Schwint, I think with all the changes and all the transitions and, playing with a lot of different guys, because I think they were trying to figure out what he was, I think a bit more of a consistent role would do a lot of good things for him. But I think, some guys need consistency. Some guys need to have a really set role. Some guys are like Zary, and you can say, put me wherever, I don't care.
Yeah.
Like, Dylan Dubé has been good at that. Dylan Dubé is put me wherever, coach. Wherever you need me to do. Some guy, everyone's wired a bit differently. So I think it's just sort of a matter of, figuring out what the niche is, and maybe the niche is utility guy. You need some utility guys. Paulie Byron's made a heck of a pro career, especially at this level, out of just being a guy who can play with anyone and anywhere in any situation. And, is he a tippity top high end guy? I don't think anyone would say he is, but is he a guy who can be relied on? Like, he was very good here. He's been very good in Montreal. He's been healthy, and unfortunately he's been healthy very infrequently. But when he's healthy, I mean, he's made a really good living and
he really
nice
has
for himself,
for an undersized guy.
Yeah, for an undersized guy, just because he knows what he's good at, and he's able to sort of be used in a lot of different roles, in a lot of different situations. And maybe it's tough if you're another team to figure out what he is, because he can be so many different things. He's kind of a chameleon. And if you can find guys in your system that can be chameleons, like your Zaris, they're pretty valuable.
Yep. Okay. What do you expect tonight?
I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll see in the first 10 minutes.
Will we?
That's sort of the
well, I mean, we saw what happened the first 10 minutes of Vancouver, and that shifted.
Yeah, but I'd say the canary in the coal mine for the Flames is always their breakouts. If they break out of their own zone well, if they can get speed going through the neutral zone early, they're going to do okay. And if they can also stop the other team from getting any kind of speed through the neutral zone, that way that both sides of the game are going pretty well. You can't really tell the first 10 or the last 10, but that's part of the middle 180. I think the transition game is the key to the middle 180 feet that they can be so good at. And I think the challenge is, if you can click early, and you can, it's a Nashville team that did not like their game against Winnipeg. They were not good against Winnipeg. No, they weren't kind of mad about it, and they should be, because it was a game that they probably just want to erase the tape on. They'll be motivated because they're up against the wall as much, if not more, than the Flames are.
Oh, for certainly, and they have success against Calgary, right? Like they've had recent success against Calgary. Yeah. They've won in this building.
And I think if you're the Flames, I mean, you're going to go into it. You'll probably, by the time you hit the ice at 7:30, you probably know how that Winnipeg San Jose game went.
Yeah.
And maybe you're thinking in the back of your mind, okay, got to win this one.
Right.
If you win no matter what anyone else does, you win this one, you basically put Nashville down, and you only have to worry about Winnipeg.
If you don't, I wonder what Wednesday's game becomes. If it becomes somewhat of a referendum with the fans, I wonder if that could be a hostile, ugly.
If they're mathematically eliminated for Wednesday, I think we see Coronado. I think we see Pelche. I think we see a lot of guys. I think.
Oh, sure.
I'd be very curious. I think a lot of the transactions on the AHL and NHL level completely depend on how this game goes. Because the Flames can't make it anymore, then maybe you bring up some of those guys we talked about. Maybe you bring up a Zary, maybe bring up a Poirier, maybe we see Dustin Wolf, because they have a lot of cap space. They have a lot of wiggle room. The only guy getting bonuses right now that'll eat up their cap space that they have left is Trevor Lewis. But they have like 20-30 grand to play with for one day.
Yeah,
you can bring up a lot of guys.
I did not mention this. I just saw it on my notes. Backlund is the nominee for the Masterton. I don't think there was any doubt there. That was a no-brainer.
I think maybe you can make a case for, I saw some folks on social media talk about Chris Tanev too. Yeah, I think one of those two would have been the slam dunk pick.
Okay.
Backlund, I think, because he has the longevity, he has the history in the market, and you talk to him. We talked to him on Friday as a media group just about the award and about all the stuff he does off ice.
Yeah.
He does so much stuff off
He
ice,
does.
and he takes no credit for it. I mean, a lot of guys in a lot of markets, and not to disparage people in other markets, other sports. People do all kinds of things for all kinds of reasons. For a lot of people, I think a lot of the off ice stuff they do is for optics, for the prestige, because being involved in charities, it's something that it ups your profile as an athlete. It's good for you for a lot of reasons.
Right.
Michael Backlund, I think, doesn't like getting credit for these things. We talked to him about his motivations and ideas and stuff. He was famously bringing food home from the family suites and dropping off at the drop-in center on his way home, because he's like, oh, it's on our way, and my wife came up with the idea. She thought it was a cool idea.
Yep.
He takes no credit for it. It's all Frida.
Yep.
The stuff they're doing with the ALS group, I think a lot of the stuff he credits to Frida. A lot of the stuff he's doing for Special Olympics, I think he credits to his family.
Parachutes for Pets. Yeah, they've been a huge benefactor there.
He credited a lot of the stuff he does off the ice to his parents and to his wife, and I think that says a lot about who Michael Backlund is as a person. But
as much as I'm going to dump on this, or we dumped on this organization for on ice and stuff like that, who was his captain? Giordano. That was
who was the captain before him.
Exactly, and who was the captain before him? Conroy. Again, all those guys are.
I think
that's just been the way,
and,
right?
And like dating back to the guy who was in the chair before me, I think
Colin Patterson,
I think they've done a really nice job. I mean, the original ownership group, the Siemens, the Squarefields, the list goes on. Harley. I think they set a tone for 100%. This is the type of citizen you need to be to wear these colors. And I think the people who have success in this market really resonate with the fans are the people that not only perform on the ice, but are able to sort of walk the walk in the same way.
You are going to be busy as a managing editor at FlamesNation this week.
Oh, Lord.
Regardless.
Yeah, they told you that you didn't have to do any math. I guess I get to do all the math. So
you get to do all the math.
We're going to have breakdowns of where things are and where things aren't. And inevitably, I think we're going to have a lot of things sort of skewing towards postmortem.
Yep.
And, just off the top of my head, Wednesday, the Wranglers play, and they could potentially clinch first place as early as Wednesday. They're beginning a 3-game series with the Abbotsford Canucks. That'll close out the regular season, and then we'll figure out, so by this weekend we should figure out what the next couple weeks look like for all the teams that call the Scotiabank Saddledome home. So it's going to be hectic.
It will be hectic.
And then we're heading into, assuming that one group may or may not be playing after Wednesday, then gotta cut the body open and start seeing what didn't work.
The autopsy.
Can't do it on a living person. So
you shouldn't.
It's impolite.
It's impolite.
Impolite.
That's right. It's impolite to start the autopsy till the person's pulse has stopped.
Yeah.
Right.
And,
as a general rule of thumb.
Yeah. And, I think, we'll do our best to put things in perspective with the fans. I mean, I don't think everyone went into these situations with the best of intentions. I don't think anyone was there were no villains here.
No, there's no villains.
When you're cooking a meal, sometimes the recipe don't work, and you can get mad at the process, or you can sit down and look at the recipe and go, okay, oh crap, did I use salt or sugar here?
Yeah.
I think that'll be the name of the game for the next, maybe a couple months.
It's going to be a while. Thank you, sir. Appreciate this. Yeah, we might have to tap you on Friday. Might. You never know what happens, right?
Friday's the day I've been told too. So
yeah, okay.
We'll touch base.
All right. Thanks, brother.
See you, man.
Ryan Pike. He is the managing editor of FlamesNation, and he joins us every Monday, brought to you by Ski Cellar Snowboard. SkiCellarSnowboard.com, 76 years in Calgary, 3 locations. McLeod Trail by Chinook Center, 17th Avenue, just off of 14th Street. Bow Ridge Road Northwest by the McDonald's, at the bottom by Winsport. Some great deals for gear for springtime in the mountains. It doesn't get any better than that. Don't forget to Afterburner tonight, immediately following the game against the Predators. And again, on Wednesday, I get that one. The boys are apparently having a bit of a party or something. So I'll be doing Afterburner on Wednesday. Looking forward to that. We're back with you on Wednesday Billy Jaffe from New England Sports Network is going to join us. We'll talk about the record-setting Boston Bruins. Marco Carducci in studio, the outstanding keeper from your Cavalry FC. Friday, Akeem Haynes, Olympic medalist and author, speaker, will be joining us in studio. And next Monday, Danny Austin's covering for me. So that's the shape of things to come. Now, time for our final mile. Tip of the hat to Dungeon Wrestling for a great show on Friday night. From top to bottom, it was a pay-per-view card as they streamed it on HN Live. I thought they had just a dynamite wrestling, but more importantly than that, and I think I mentioned it on Friday, they were kind enough to invite a bunch of Heroes kids and Superheroes kids. So for me to watch our kids get to take advantage of and have fun, and hung out with Brent Gibbs, hung out with Boomer, David Legg, all kinds of friends there. But it was an awesome card, including the Billington Bulldogs winning the tag team championships from the Bollywood Boys. That was an unbelievable match. Our pal, our buddy, Michael Richard Blaze, who's going to do 8 straight hours on May 13th, was in the opening event, and that match was really good too. So if you haven't checked it out, I believe there's another show coming up during Stampede, but back in the pavilion where it deserves to be. And finally, speaking of Brent Gibbs and other co-workers of his, Tori Peterson from Flames Digital side, Chris Huey from their graphics design department, and many others, kudos to them. They auctioned off the Pride jerseys and the Treaty 7 jerseys, and the generous donations of Flames fans, Calgarians, and hockey fans, totaling well over $100,000, which will go back to community and charities, which support both the Pride Initiative and Treaty 7 initiatives as well. So just want to make sure that we are recognizing the great work that was done over there this year, to make sure that, there's a lasting impact. They're not just wearing these jerseys during warm-up, but they're actually making good in the community. That's it. Thanks to Jack and Gavin, our 2 producers today. Thanks to Colin Patterson. Thanks to Ryan Pike for joining us. We're back on Wednesday with Billy Jaffe and with Marco Carducci. Enjoy yourselves. We'll see you in 2 days, everybody.
When there's 2 sides to every coin, then there's a conversation you can join. But I'm an old dog and there's new tricks, and some of my opinions you just can't fix. 'Cause I'm an old man yelling at the sky. I'ma shake my fists at the clouds and cry. Get off my lawn, you snowflake, before I have a meltdown, breakdown, shakedown. 'Cause this is my hometown, so back down, sports clown. It's all just a game, and it's the last down, let down, cowtown. I said it's all just a game. I give the touchdown, the rundown, the lowdown, 'cause it's over the game. Gonna crack down and shut down. Sundown. I said it's all just a game.